Summers growing up were magical, the kind of magic that only truly exists in our memory, and the way we like to remember things versus how they actually happen. Maybe that is how it's supposed to be. Maybe those memories are just a Midsummer Night's Dream. When I was in high school, my entire family decided to audition for Shakespeare in the Park in our town, which was doing A Midsummer Night's Dream. I was cast as a woodland fairy. My father was Peter Quince. My mother was just a background role in the city scenes. And my younger sister was cast as essentially Oberon's shadow, following him everywhere like a puppy dog. Not only was my family in the show with me, but many of my friends were in the show as well. Most notably, my friend Dustin, who I generally refer to as Stovall. Now, Dustin was portraying that mischievous character of Robin Goodfellow, also known as Puck. Not realizing this at the beginning of the summer, much like Puck is the catalyst in the show, Stovall was the catalyst of the summer. He was most fitted for the role of Puck, for so many reasons, talented actor only being one of them. Stovall basically was Puck, extremely mischievous, but his heart was always in the right place. When I think back on summer nights in my teen years, Stovall is front and center. And that should have probably scared my parents to death. Instead, they were as wooed by Stovall's charms as everyone else was. This is why we thought nothing of it, myself and my parents, when Stovall invited all of the young cast members out to play volleyball one hot night. Honestly, I believe this never had bad intentions. I believe that Stovall truly just was looking for something new for us all to do. Stovall never had bad intentions. When we went bowling one night and he decided he wanted to keep the bowling shoes as his own, he left his other shoes at the bowling alley for them to have in an effort to pay for what he had taken. He thought it was a fair trade, even though he never said anything to anyone at the bowling alley. That was just how Stovall was. My parents agreed to allow me to have a later curfew this particular night after rehearsal when Stovall invited me out. After all, Stovall had charmed them. Plenty of my other friends in the cast were going, and my parents trusted them as well. What trouble could a bunch of teenagers in a small town really get into just playing volleyball? And the only volleyball courts that they knew of were at Sonic. We couldn't seriously have that big of a problem at Sonic, right? So after rehearsal, all of us who were going out to play volleyball piled into our cars and headed for Sonic, Stovall at the helm. When we arrived, we quickly found out that there were other people playing volleyball, and we wouldn't be able to that night. Not knowing what to do next, all of us looked to Stovall, who reminds us that there are sand volleyball courts at Jerry Ivy Park. Now, Jerry Ivy Park is situated right next to one of the high schools in town. It's got two playgrounds, a pond, a gazebo, sand volleyball courts, and tennis courts. It's also got a park curfew of midnight. And the volleyball courts are visible from the street when you're driving through. Now, Stovall said that he was going to go to Walmart to buy the volleyball. And it took him a little bit too long. But when he finally arrived, he had some beverages with him. Now it's probably 10:30 at night in a public park that is frequently trafficked on a hot summer night, and a bunch of underage teens have alcohol and a volleyball. I was thinking this was a bad idea. I'd never done anything wrong before, not like this. One look at Stovall's smile, a little bit of charming words, and I agreed. No one was in the park. What kind of trouble could we really get into? We weren't openly drinking the alcohol. It was mixed in soda bottles. Who was going to know, right? We weren't going to get into that much trouble. I mean, we were just a bunch of kids. This couldn't possibly be a bad idea. Not at all. Stovall thinks it'll be fine, so it must be. Now, I was actually a really good kid. I mean that. I was a theater geek. I spent every summer focusing on theater since I was very young. That was my life. I spent my school year focusing on theater too. I didn't do drugs. I didn't run with the wrong crowd. I got good grades. I minded my parents, all those things. I had never drank alcohol besides a sip of beer maybe if I asked my dad if I could taste it when he had one at home. Stovall, on the other hand, had always been trouble, with a capital T. Theater is, as he put it, what saved him. He was a drinker, a druggie, and didn't care about school until he came out of rehab and auditioned for a play for lack of anything better to do. He was so naturally talented and charming that he was the immediate star of the community. All that trouble was overlooked by his charm, sweet personality, and the way he seemingly had turned around and really truly did. Except for maybe this idea. But we all have our faults, don't we? In the fuzzy haze of summers gone by, I don't remember exactly how it came up, but this innocent sand volleyball game with the little adult beverages turned into a game of high stakes. And those high stakes were our clothing. That's right. At some point, Stovall and his charmed convinced everyone that strip sand volleyball was the game to play. Now I, being the good girl that I was, didn't drink that much, but still decided to go along with this idea. What's going to happen? We are just a bunch of kids looking for a way to combat the summer heat in a public park at almost curfew with alcohol mixed in. The rules of the game were simple. Just your standard volleyball game. But every 5 points the opposing team made, the losing team had to remove an article of clothing. As the game started, it didn't seem like it would be that difficult to keep my clothes on. I mean, after all, a few of my teammates had actually played on the high school volleyball team. Boy, was I wrong. It turns out we all sucked. We were terrible, which essentially means you had a bunch of half-naked teens in a public park after curfew with alcohol in their systems. At 15 points, my friend Maggie, who also happened to be my ride, decided it was time for us to leave, so we headed out. Some of the other teens stayed, including Stovall. The next evening, after rehearsal, Stovall flashed that mischievous grin of his and again asked who was up for volleyball. After all, we now had a volleyball and nothing had happened the night before. It would all be good. This time, Maggie and I had the brilliant idea to run home and put on more clothing. Bathing suits under our clothes and jackets and the like. Why my parents never raised an eyebrow to me running out of the house in the summer heat with 3 layers of clothing on, I'll never know. As the summer and the rehearsal for Midsummer Night's Dream progressed, we continued this evening ritual. As soon as rehearsal ended, off we went to Jerry Ivy Park, volleyball in hand. Some nights alcohol, some nights not. We never got caught. We began to feel invincible. Then it happened, and all I could say was, it's all Stovall's fault. 12:30 p.m. on a hot July evening, a cop drove through Jerry Ivy Park. What did that cop stumble upon? A bunch of half-naked teens playing volleyball after curfew and a few empty Coke bottles laying around. As I was being placed in the back of the cruiser, all I could think was, it's all Stovall's fault. That, and how was I going to explain this one to my parents? It was Stovall's idea, and what the papers would say the next day. Dustin Stovall leads a band of actors astray, making asses out of them literally and figuratively. Now here's the lucky part. The empty Coke bottles never contained alcohol that night. The cops who busted us decided that they understood we were just a bunch of teens bored on a hot summer night. No doubt Stovall had charmed them a bit. The cops decided that being put in the cruiser and a stern lecture would scare us straight, and no one ever knew of the incident, and we were let go. We did not go back to the park to play volleyball again that summer, which was just as well, since the next night was the opening night of the show. Stovall's mischievous ways had led us to this great summer adventure, and a story that we might not be able to share until we were adults. I ended up telling my parents all but the police part of it after my high school graduation. And you know what? They just laughed. because I had lived a little, giving in to the charms of a mischievous, maybe not an actual sprite, though, named Stovall. I knew that it was magical, though, on that final night of the show. I knew that I had experienced something I would never forget, something that would change me. Puck's words sum it all up, even now. If we shadows have offended, think but this and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here while these visions did appear, and this weak and idle theme no more yielding but a dream. Gentles, do not reprehend. If you pardon, we shall mend. And as I am an honest Puck, if you have unearned luck, now to scape the serpent's tongue, we will make amends ere long, else the Puck a liar call. So, good night unto you all, and give me your hands if we be friends, and Robin shall restore amends.